So let's run through some of the basics of the Max ECU software, some of the key features that you'll probably like. Some of these features I'll break down in depth in some of the ensuing videos, but let's just go over the general functionality of the ECU. Here's your ECU logging settings. Here's where you select what channels you want to log, and you can also designate logging conditions on how you start the logger. Some people might install a button where they can put a button on the bike and tell it when to log. A drag racer is going to not have long logs anyway, but an outdoors guy or supercross guy might not want it logging the whole time. You can designate a specific RPM, manifold pressure, or how long after you want it to turn off the data logger. Moving on, you got tune notes. Anything about this map file that you want to be remembered before you save it, you can put it right here in your notes, and that will be attached to that map file always. You have ECU lock. You tuner guys will love this option. You could go in here and lock your map file so that it can't get spread around on you. Limits is the next tab. You got your rev limiter here. Some guys like to buzz these things up there pretty high. You can set different rev limiters, but you can also set what kind of rev limiter. I know a lot of guys ride on a rev limiter in certain tracks. You can set it to where it's ignition, fuel, fuel plus ignition. There's a lot of different options on how to tune the rev limiter, for lack of a better term. Let's move on from here. Let's go to your fuel tab, fuel general tab. For most gasolines, you can set the fuel stoichiometric, just leave it here at 14.7, but for you guys who might run a more radical fuel, you got a drop down box here with multiple different options in the stoichiometric that goes with that fuel. Or if you just run a race fuel and you know what that stoichiometric is specifically for that fuel, you can put a custom setting option here and designate whatever you might want that to be. This keeps the map file right. So if you're not familiar with Lambda, this makes it so that your air fuel reading correlates with the Lambda target that you have set. This is also the tab where if you run a secondary injector like some of you guys put in, or if you have a stock Kawasaki 250, this is where you would enable a secondary injector. When you do that, it creates a staged injection tab right here. When it creates that, you can also come in here and designate how you want that secondary injector to come on. You can auto transition it, which makes it to where when the primary injector gets over a certain duty cycle, it automatically activates the secondary injector. Or you can actually create your own fuel table to where you phase the injector in manually however you'd like. The options are endless on the secondary injector. Moving on to Lambda control. This is one of those options that we'll break down in depth in another video, but this is what you would also call closed loop. This is where you designate how much fuel you will want the ECU to allow to take away or to add. Based on your target air fuel value, this is where you keep the bike on target through all RPM ranges and all TPSs. Let's move on down to the inputs tab. Let's start here at sensors. So here's where you can set your TPS. You got a minimum voltage and a maximum voltage. Have the motorcycle on, communicate it with the ECU, have the throttle closed and click get current voltage. Then you want to open the throttle wide open and click get current voltage. That'll give you your TPS range. Diagnostics is another cool tab. So any issues that you might have with the ECU, it'll flash up an error code, which will be right here with a description to tell you what that error code correlates to. Moving on to some of the fun stuff. Here's your fuel table. Most aftermarket tuners have a already set fuel table, and you can only add or take away fuel from that background tune file. That's not the case here with PowerPak. You have a complete fuel table based off of throttle position, RPM, and here's all your cells. You can do whatever you want there. You can add more cells if you want more definition, and you can do a lot of other cool things. But one of the cool features is a 4-dimensional axis. You can add a 4D axis. Now I have created a different VE table based on each gear. You know, you get different load ranges in different gears. One map file might not work for that bike in every gear. You may need to do something different in 3rd gear based on the track you're at. You may need to do something different in 4th, 5th, etc., etc. You can now do that. So let's take 5th gear here and let's just put zeros here. You'll see now when I click on 4th that that's not the case. 3rd, 2nd, 1st. So the ECU gives you a plethora of tuning options. As you dive in, you'll learn some of these features, and if you need anything, of course, you can call us here at Vance Hines Motorsports. Let's move to your Lambda table. Your Lambda table is your target Lambda. So this is what the closed loop works off of. Whatever you tell it you want it to be at set throttle positions or RPM ranges, you can make this infinitely different. If you want it to idle a little bit leaner or your drivability to be a little bit leaner, you can change that Lambda. If you want it to be a little richer in a certain section of the map, you can change that part there. You can do whatever you want. These are based off of your findings, what you think your bike likes to run at, or what feels best to the rider. I know a lot of guys are not used to operating in lambda. This ECU uses lambda to keep the targets. I know a lot of people like to read air fuel numbers, but just for example of how to correlate a lambda to an air fuel reading, if you remember in our fuel general tab, we designated a stoichiometric. The stoichiometric of gasoline is 14.7. So if you have a 0.89 target lambda, you simply take your calculator, do 0.89, multiply it by 14.7. That gives you an air fuel of 13.08, 13.1, 13.0, whatever you want to call it. That's how you can correlate a lambda number to an air fuel ratio number in simple terms. Let's move to your ignition angle table. Here's your ignition table. You can play around with this infinitely, just like the fuel table. You could also do this infinitely in 4-dimensional axis, same as what I showed you with the fuel table. Your extra fuel and ignition tables are where your modes are. So I have a mode B already designated in the map file, but I don't have any values in there. This is for you guys to designate. You can add or take away fuel based on mode B when you press your stop mode button, or add or take away timing. And it doesn't have to be an overall global change. This could be something that's just done in a certain range. A lot of this stuff we'll play with in the map modes video that's ensuing. Right now, just wanted to show you where everything was, show you general functions in the ECU. We'll dive in a lot deeper with a lot of this stuff as time goes.